All right, and we're live. How we doing, folks? The ITRBoxing weekend recap is back at you. Of course, one of these weekends where we got multiple fight cards. Not the worst thing in the world for guys like us. Maybe not the best thing if you want to get everything seen as much as possible, but pretty good weekend of boxing. Nibs, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing well, baby. How you living, man?
Doing good, man. I figured we'd start with the thing that I think is on the majority of fight fans' minds, even if it's not the most significant thing, but it's the rematch between Rafael Espinoza and Robesi Ramirez, ending in a kind of sudden way with Robesi turning, throwing his hand up and basically signaling that he was done. It was very sudden. It's also come out since the end of that fight that he had a broken orbital bone, which is a very serious injury. Nibs, what were your initial reactions, and then how do you feel about this fight now that we've had a day and some air from it?
I'll say this: my feelings about it haven't changed, but I will preface what I'm about to say with this: I am not now, nor have I ever been, a professional boxer. I've never been paid to get my ass whipped or whoop someone else's ass. Um, However, being a fan of the sport as long as I have been, there are a lot of things that are excusable, right? I don't need my fighters to be good guys. I don't need them to be role models. I don't need them to necessarily fight clean all the time either. But what I do need them to do is not be bitches in the ring. And Robesi Ramirez was a bitch, bro. Look, I get it. He had a broken orbital bone, and anybody who knows anything about that in any sport, you'd probably make me want to quit too. But you're a boxer. You're supposed to be better than us, right? You're supposed to be a different kind of breed than us normal folk. The guy you were fighting against the last time had an ankle injury so severe the doctor said he didn't know how he was walking, let alone how he went on to fight. 7 more rounds from the injury. The guy in the main event who did get knocked out has fought several times with fractured hands. He's famous for fighting almost a whole fight with a broken jaw and winning the fight. You get punched in the face, wave your hand, and it's no mas. I'm not a fan of it, bro. And as a fan of boxing, I lose a lot of respect for Robesi Ramirez, even with everything I just said, prefacing what I just said.
So I think I feel a little bit differently about it. We have seen this be a really serious injury on multiple guys. There are
Hmm.
instances where guys have stopped during the fight, right? That's Daniel Dubois, that's Kell Brook when he fought Golovkin. There's multiple examples of high level guys having to stop fighting because of this injury. There's also guys who have fought through it. Some of those guys are Israel Vasquez, Antonio Margarito, who were never the same, right? Margarito's eye never looked right after he fought Manny Pacquiao. Although there was always something a little off about it, and he had surgeries and this and that. So I think that having the context of knowing what the injury is, I guess I'm just less inclined to say, oh, he's a quitter, he doesn't have the heart, this and that. I'm more inclined to say, as a civilian, who am I to tell you to fight with a broken eye socket? You don't got to do that for me. But I hear what you're saying. Our expectations of boxers is that they're going to do shit that we don't do. And Robesi very calmly explaining, listen, I made a decision for my health. A lot of fight fans are just not trying to hear that. I get it, but he's not the first guy to not be able to fight through this injury. He won't be the last. And I think you just have to give more credit to guys who are able to fight through injuries like that, because it so often these guys leave a piece of themselves in the ring. And I apologize for all the sirens. I apologize for this guy who's singing in my alley right now. There's a lot of noise going on. But I think the point really is, I just don't, me in street clothes right now, Tim Bradley can call him a quitter if he wants.
But are you quitting the podcast because of those issues? No. Oh, okay. I just was want to. Throw that out there.
Right, but it's a little easier than getting hit. You know what I'm saying? My guy Jesus M pulling up as always. Appreciate you, my boy. What we talking about?
Jesus.
Well, we're starting off talking about Robesi Ramirez and Rafael Espinoza. I feel like, me and Nibs feel a little differently about it, but it's two sides of the coin because, there's fight fans all over that I think are going to the extreme of saying, oh, he'll never fight again and this and that. Look what Daniel Dubois has done since he lost to Joe Joyce. He's been able to completely reinvent himself. And I don't know that moment necessarily frames, his character as a fighter or who he
But
is,
did did Dubois quit the fight or did he get stopped? You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
he took a knee and he didn't get up. You know what I mean?
But he was getting pummeled at the time that happened, right? Like it wasn't like he caught one punch, felt some discomfort and said, "Oh, fuck this, I'm gonna take a knee." He was catching several punches that put him down, right? Most of us didn't even know it was the orbital bone until after, right? I think he was just stopped. And I think the fact that he caught that injury probably a round or two earlier and was still fighting through it, right? And then got stopped. This is, I got tapped in the face and said, nope.
Well, in retrospect, it was a pretty hard shot. I mean, you could see on the replay, he lands it real clean. It's a short little shot. It's one of those weird momentum shots.
Let me put it this way, right? This is the way I see it, right? If this were basketball, football, baseball, I'd completely agree with you. And I would think that's a very valid point. Boxing, MMA, this is the closest thing we have to the gladiators, right? I don't want to hear that shit. You're in the ring.
So let me ask you, though.
Give me the blood in the sport.
So let me ask you, when Kell Brook goes down against Golovkin and he doesn't get back up, do you feel the same way?
No, because he was getting his ass whipped at the time. Like it was, again, we're talking about an accumulation of punches. And again, an injury that happened prior to you quitting. It wasn't that you quit. You were getting your ass whipped. Daniel Dubois was getting his ass whipped. This was one punch. He backed up, looked fine, and then just waves his hand. Nope, that punch hurt. I'm out. If he'd have continued fighting, if we're talking, this happens round 7, right? His eye is like this, right? And they say, you know what? Let somebody else stops the fight because you can't see. I'll take that, right? I get orbital bone fractures can derail a career. This is boxing, folks. If you're going to be a boxer, if you're going to be a blood sport participant, you have to be different, right? You look at Timothy Bradley, who's commenting on that fight, right? We all saw the Provodnikov fight. If you haven't, get your Google on.
Yeah, for real. I mean? For any of the youngins in the chat today, definitely go back and watch that one.
He said there were parts of the fight he can't remember at all. You understand? And that fight happened, 10, 15 years ago? Come on, man. Like, you look at guys like Mickey Ward. Mickey Ward still can't see straight. But I never saw Mickey Ward quit. I've seen him being stopped, but I've never seen him quit. This was different. You quit. There's a difference between you got stopped and you quit. And he quit. Like, a lot of people love Roberto Duran. That dude quit. No mas. That's a quit. I can take you getting stopped. I can't take you bitching up and just saying, oh, no. Please stop hitting me. That's what Robesi Ramirez did.
Yeah, Jesus, I'm saying I don't blame Robesi to tap out because orbital injury can be recurring. Look at Margarito. Margarito is really the prime example, I think, in that, and his eye ultimately has been deformed for the rest of his life. And again, these are the risks that every fighter takes in the ring. I think that's why I'm less inclined to call him out for it. Listen, am I happy that that's how the fight ended? No, that, the first one was probably fight of the year, if not a contender for it. I think we were expecting another high level championship level title fight. And that's not, we got that for about 6 rounds. And then obviously Robesi turned and said, I'm done. And we always expect, someone else will do it. The corner will do it. The ref will do it. Someone else will take the fighter's safety into their hands. And in this case, the fighter took their own safety into their hands. And like I said, can I look at Robesi the same way as I do as someone that does fight through that kind of injury? Sure. I probably have a little bit more respect for Israel Vasquez because he was able to fight through that injury on multiple occasions. But Israel Vasquez had to live with that. You know what I mean? He had to lose an eye for that. So it's just, there's two sides to every coin. It's such a tough sport, man. I try to give fighters grace when it comes to moments like this. We've seen guys land punches, break their hands, turn, and have to stop. We've seen guys fight broken hands, so there's everybody, not all injuries are created equal, I guess is what I'm saying.
Look at Oscar Valdez, right? Did Oscar Valdez get stopped in the main event, or did he quit?
Right.
If Oscar Valdez could have kept going, there's no doubt in anybody's mind he would have, right? Because he's got the heart and balls of, I mean, look, I'm willing to fully admit he's got more balls than me. You know what I mean? Fighting with a broken jaw, bro, I probably would have tapped out. But I'm not a boxer, right? That's the standard. Like, and you're on the same card as that guy, right? This has been different if this had been the main event, maybe, right? But you're on a card with a guy who's willing to go through what, if I would just say, if Oscar Valdez had gotten that same injury, you think he'd have quit? You think he'd have waved his hand and be like, no, I'm out? Hell no. They would have had to have pulled him out of there. That's the expectation we have from our boxers. And quite frankly, I get that this is a different era, and we're giving these guys a lot of grace because they're thinking career longevity. They're thinking health. Yes, this, that, and the third. They're making business decisions. I don't want my boxers making business decisions in the ring. I want them going out there to fucking win a fight. That's my opinion.
Sure. And I think we've done a pretty good job here giving everybody two sides to this coin. In talking about Rafael Espinoza, the winner of this fight, I think we're starting to see a new Mexican star emerging in the sport of boxing. Robesi is a guy that we've both been high on for a long time prior to these two fights. And Espinoza has had truly some pretty special moments in these two fights. Where do you see him at featherweight? Where do you see him in boxing? Do you see him someone, who's ascending right now? Like, where do you kind of see him at the moment?
He's got some weaknesses. If we're being super critical of his game, he's got some weaknesses. He is there to be hit, especially for a guy who's 6'1" in this division. Right? He reminds me of a Paul Williams.
It's Paul Williams, Fundora.
Right. Where he should be fighting from the outside, and when he does do that, like in the fight he had before this, beautiful fight. It was a thing of art. I mean, he did everything you want a guy his size, his abilities to do. Then he gets in there with a guy like Robesi, and it almost feels like he has to, throw hands. And I love that about him. But he's there to be hit. So I think there are people in this division that, or even if he steps up, because he's a big guy. I think he came in at damn near 145. By the time the fight was coming in. So he's a big guy. So if he decides to move up, there are going to be some guys that can give him some trouble. But I'm here to tell you, enjoy the ride while you can. While this dude is out there and he's got a strap and he's winning, enjoy it because he's going to give you some great action.
And I think like Paul Williams and Fundora, because he's bigger, he does give up his height, right? And he's getting hit with shit. But there's a level of physicality that he's going to be able to impose on guys at featherweight that they're not used to. They're not going to be used to guys that big and strong coming at them and throwing volume at them. And Robesi's a talented guy, right? He's got good timing. He's got good hand speed. Not everybody's going to be able to find those opportunities in the same way as Robesi. And I just think that Espinoza, against other more offensive-minded fighters, he's going to be a lot to handle, bro.
I mean, in the division right now. Again, if he fights the way he's been fighting, he's a problem for everybody, bro. Again, like I said, I think he'll have to move up before he really gets a challenge. But there are some guys out there who can find that chin and are destructive, right? The problem for them is how big this guy is. So they've got to get in there. But he seems to be willing to allow guys to get in and exchange with him. So, against some more destructive punchers, no disrespect to Robisi's power, but there are guys who hit a lot harder than him, a division up. I think at where he's at now, though, bro, it'd
I
be
mean, how
hard
many
to bet
guys?
against
How
him
many
now.
guys? Yeah, how many guys at featherweight can keep a 6'1" welterweight off of them for 12 rounds? I just don't think there's going to be that many guys. Jesus, I don't know if Robesi needs a new trainer. I don't think. Me personally, I just think this guy's got his number. And I think that Robesi can win some more fights. He's clearly still got the foot movement, and the ability. It's just going to be a matter of, like we've been discussing, how much of himself is he willing to put into boxing at this point in his life? But I think for Espinoza, I want to see him with Angelo Lea. I mean, how funny would a fight with him and Nick Ball, nearly a foot height difference in that fight? That would be a great matchup. There's a lot of fun fights for him to be a part of at this weight.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, like I said, at the weight, there's really nobody that's really gonna test him. I think he has to move up a weight class because there's some far more destructive punchers at that weight class. That can give him some problems. But the way he fights, bro, it's just entertaining as shit, and he does it at a high level. He's got everything you want to. I mean, let's be real. High level Mexican fighters are always entertaining to watch. You
Yeah.
get a guy who's 6'1" in any division, right? I mean, this guy could be at welterweight giving people problems. His height and range is a problem for anybody with his skill, and the fact that he throws some boulders around. I mean, the dude's he's got it, bro, and I'm excited. I said this, in the article I wrote for the site ITRBoxing.com. Go check that out. I'm excited to see where he goes from here because I think, and it's not not taking anything away from him, even though I think Robesi quit. I think he was on his way to winning the fight anyway. So I think he was starting. I think the first couple of rounds, Robesi was kind of doing his thing, and he was already turning it around quicker than he did the previous fight. So I think he was on his way to win anyway, even if the injury hadn't happened.
Well, just another random matchup I'll throw out there. How fun would a fight between him and Ray Vargas be, where he would actually have somebody who's maybe roughly in his height vicinity that has some real boxing ability, real contrast to styles? I think that could be a fun fight as well for Espinoza.
I think that would be a great fight. And I think that, it'd be one of those fights you could, again, that's another one of those fights, bro. You can put on one of those big major cards and people are going to love it. And then it's going to, elevate his stock. So I'm all for it. I think, again, that's a fight where I think he wins, but it's going to be enough, back and forth skill wise to make it an interesting fight.
Hey, Suzanne, I know you think he's boring, but I'm saying there's a contrast there where you got a back foot counter puncher against a really aggressive guy, but they're similar heights. I think it could be an interesting fight. I think you're right about that too. Navarette versus Espinoza would be a lot of fun. Let's move over to Emmanuel Navarette because I kind of expected, to be honest with you, going in, I read this fight all wrong. I kind of thought that Oscar would win this fight. He looked sharp against Liam Wilson. Navarrette's been on a little bit of a downslide against Conceição, against Dennis Baranchik. I just didn't necessarily see that Navarrete would still have the elite level engine, and I thought that Valdez would be able to beat him just being a little sharper. But Navarrete, so much bigger, so much stronger, basically hurting Valdez with every big shot that he threw. Valdez just couldn't handle the pressure. Even though he hit Navarrete with some bombs, just the punch resistance was completely different. Nibs, what do you make of this fight? Is this that Navarrete is back and he's still a guy at 130, or is it that Valdez is really kind of at the end of the line, or is it both?
I think that I don't think that it's necessarily that Valdez is at the end of his rope. He could be, right? But I think styles make fights. We talked about this last week when we were kind of making predictions for the fight. I said it's going to be more of the same. I think Navarrete is going to dog walk Valdez. This was basically the first fight, just a step up. Like he just ended it, sooner than, I mean, that body shot was vicious, perfectly, landed too. I mean, you saw it when he landed. He's like, yeah, he's not going to get up from that. I think Navarrete has Valdez's number every day of the week, twice on Sunday. I mean, you saw him; he's walking around with a beer belly, and still, puts the tune up on him. So I just think Valdez has nothing for Navarrete. Like I said before, I didn't need to see the fight. Obviously, I love watching Oscar Valdez fight, but I don't need to see him fight Navarrete anymore. I think it's time for him to just move on and fight somebody that's going to give us a competitive fight. Him against Navarrete is not competitive, bro.
What do you think Navarrete does moving forward, though? Because it's like he moved up to 135. The Baranchik fight was not good. He drops Conceição twice and loses probably the last 6 rounds really clean. It's been an inconsistent run from Navarrete, but at the same time, there's just that talent component, right? That certain guys that don't always have the elite level discipline, like Zordo or Tyson Fury, like they just have that talent component where they're just a little better and they got the heart, they got the balls. They may not train the way the other elite fighters do, but they have that talent thing. Like, what do you think he does moving forward?
I think it really depends on whether or not we believe how serious that left hand injury was, right? So, Navarrete, said, before he fought Conceição, he had a left hand injury, ended up did having to get surgery on it. You can actually prove that. And then wasn't healed by the time he fought Baranchik, right? So if you believe in how serious that left hand injury was, then okay, go back to 135 when you're healthy and let's see what you can do then. You know what I'm saying? Because I do think talent-wise, he's in there. Like you have to, when you have that much talent, I think, you can beat just about anybody. And we also have to throw in to the fact that those two fights weren't against bums. Conceição, you know what I'm saying, won a belt. You know what I mean? In the interim, yeah, he lost it, but both of those fights were competitive as hell against Shock, right? And then Baranchik's, a top 10 level kind of guy in the weight division. So, you pair that with the injury and you go, okay, let's give him a mulligan. And then he completely dominates Valdez again in the rematch. So I think we can give him some grace, let him go back up to 135 and see what he can do. Because I don't think at 130 there's anybody that's going to stop him.
I don't know about that, bro. I mean, 130's got some guys right now. I mean, you got Shock Foster, you got Ray Ford. There's some really talented guys at 130. Obviously, Navarrete has beaten guys with more boxing talent and ability because of his awkward style. But there's some really good, composed champions at this weight right now. I just felt also that on a style level, Valdez was kind of there to be hit. He was there. He was eager to kind of make a fight of it. And I'm not sure that, I saw anything drastically different about Navarrete other than just seeing him be dominant again. But I think about, how he's going to handle, somebody like Shock's foot movement. I don't know how he deals with that at this point in his career.
I think and here's I get your point. Here's the interesting thing about Navarrete. When he's taking it serious, when he's 100% dialed in, I don't think there's anybody in his weight class that can see him, period, right? And I think he's a problem for anybody else at 135. You know what I mean? So the question then becomes, what version of Navarrete are we getting? Are we getting a guy who's just showing up, going purely off talent? And the fucked up thing is that's a 50-50 fight in any fight he's in. The guy who shows up with a beer belly who's just talented as shit, is probably going to go 50-50 with anybody. But if you get the version of him that's hella tuned in, hella prepared, ready to rock, you're in for a long night, bro. That's all I'm saying. And I don't think anybody else can take what he's dishing out as much as he can take what they're dishing out.
This one had a really stacked undercard. Lindolfo Delgado stopping Jackson Marinez. You got Richard Torres beating a guy in Isaac Munoz, Giovanni Santillan, some super talented prospects in Albert Chop Chop Gonzalez and Steve Navarro. Really kind of fun card with a lot of good, solid young talent on it. Was there anyone on there that stood out for you, Nibs?
For me, I like Chop Chop. I like what I saw from him, and I see it. Like, he's got all the little things right. He doesn't necessarily blow you off the page. But I'm telling you, when you watch his fight, you're going, okay, young fella, I saw that. And it's the little stuff. The guy, if you pay attention to boxing, you really appreciate the little things, and he's got enough of that. Plus, I think he's talented as shit. I'd like to see where he goes. Richard Torres, to me, I was intrigued by this fight because even though the guy he's fighting, looks like a refrigerator, he's got some fast hands, and he isn't one of these guys that comes in and just lays down. I thought he got an impressive win, but again, I still feel like Richard Torres is at a place where the time for him to have stepped up his level of competition was 4 fights ago. You know what I'm saying? I think he's still fighting the guys who are just a step above the cab drivers. And I think it's time to start putting him in there with some real guys to see where he really is in the division. I mean, they're already talking about putting him in with champs, and he's not ready for that.
And also putting him in with some guys that are bigger than him. I mean, when he gets up to the top at heavyweight, he's almost always going to be the smaller guy. And we've seen this, with Jared Anderson. He came up fighting smaller guys, but he's 6'4", 230. It's like once you get to the elite at heavyweight, you're going to be the smaller guy. So I think that's something that, Richard needs to start.
We saw how that turned out for Jared.
Yeah, and I just think that's something Richard needs to start preparing for. As far as the competition in his last 3 fights with, stopping Brandon Moore, who was undefeated, Joey DeWaco, pretty decent, jobber type, and now this guy, he's at least moving in the right direction. Obviously, it's not where either of us think he could be with his ability, but I think it is starting to move in the right direction.
Do any of those wins make you think he's ready for the next level? Like in those fights individually, there's nothing I can look at from any of those last 3 fights and go, yeah, he's ready for the next level. In my mind, I think he's ready because I know he's uber talented. I've seen him in the Olympics. He's got the pedigree, right? So you're thinking, yeah, he should be. But if I'm looking at just those fights alone, if I had never seen Richard Torres before, I'm going, okay. I mean, this was a cab driver fight. You know what I mean? I wouldn't put him in against Jared Anderson next. I wouldn't put him against a Bocoli. I wouldn't put him in.
See, I think Jared would be a good fight for him at this point in the game. And to be honest, do they show me he's ready for the next level? No, but they show me more than the Curtis Harper fight did, right? He is starting to fight a level of guy that is at least showing up to win, even if they can't take the power and all the things that he brings to the table. I'm just saying, I think it's moving in the right direction. It's just not moving as quickly as I think you or I would like it to be.
Yeah, because, and again, it's the same things we were saying about Jared Anderson, and I hate to keep putting it back on him, but it's almost identical, right? What happens when you hit that guy with your Sunday punch? Even if he goes down, he gets back up and smiles in your face and go, okay, come on, young fella. He hasn't had that happen yet, right? Jared, we saw what happened when it happened to Jared Anderson. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? He almost got stopped. You know what I mean? In his step up fight. You know what I mean? In a fight we all
Right.
think he won
You're
on
talking
the
about
way.
learning about, his character as a fighter, which you're right. I don't think we know anything about that. I think we're starting to learn more about his ability though. And those are the things that I like what I'm seeing. I like the way he throws combinations. I like his footwork. He has some tools that not every heavyweight has, and not all the, not every 6'6", 250-pound heavyweight has either.
He's beating the computer on easy right now.
I think that's a fair comparison. One of the other guys for me that really stood out was Steve Navarro, man. I don't know if you got to watch Steve, but this kid's 20
Yeah.
years old, and the way he's
Mhm.
using footwork and angles, you know, he's one of those guys. It's hard for me to not get out ahead of myself, but there's flashes of Bam, there's flashes of Lomachenko, there's some really great shit that this young man's doing in there. And I think the sky's the limit for that one.
I mean, and he was in with a decent guy. Like the guy he was in against was 7-1 coming into the fight. He's a pro. He's another one of these guys that came up tough. It wasn't like, again, he wasn't in there against just some jobber. He was in there against a kid who thinks he's got a decent career ahead of him as well. But then you see the look on that guy's face when Navarro's landing his punches. He's like, I think it was the knockdown that ended the fight. The look on his face is like, well, shit, I can't get, I can't get away from this kid. That's what makes you excited about Navarro, bro. It's not just his ability; it's his opponent's inability to do anything with him at this point. And
Yeah,
again, he's not fighting just cab drivers. He's fighting guys who are prospects coming up just like him, thinking they can get it done, and then he gets in there and proves to them there are levels to this game.
there's a real maturity and a temperament to him that I think I'm also really impressed with, where he doesn't get outside of himself. He really stays within himself. He doesn't get reckless. He doesn't get hit a lot. There's just a lot to, especially for a 20-year-old guy. That's the part that I think is really, the best part about him. There's a lot of upside with Steve Navarro.
And he's got a killer's mentality, right?
Yeah.
He knows when you're in trouble, and he knows how to finish, and that's really important.
One of the last one I think worth talking about on this card is Lindolfo Delgado stopping Jackson Mariñez. Good win for Delgado. It was a slow fight. Mariñez is a pretty tricky technical guy, solid boxer from the outside, good feet. Lindolfo's getting the Charles Conwell, Arnold Barbosa treatment, where he's just, the next one's the big one, fight after fight. It's a really tough spot to be in, but he is in a weight class that, even if you don't get a title fight, there are a ton of interesting fights for him to be in. I'm not sure who that is. Jesus M makes a great suggestion. Delgado against Elvis Rodriguez. It's two guys who are kind of in similar positions. I think that is a good matchup. Nibs, what do you think of Lindolfo Delgado?
One, I love him as a fighter. I mean, he broke down Mariñez, beautifully. You know what I'm saying? And that's not an easy fight. Mariñez is not he's not an easy out. But he's got some pillow hands. He's not a hard enough hitter to make you second guess yourself. You know what I'm saying? But again, Delgado treated him like he was supposed to, right? He did what he was supposed to. And I think as far as his career, I think you're right. I think he's in career purgatory. It's one of those things where he's going to get a lot of Mariñez type fights, but nobody of circumstance really wants to touch it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That stove is way too hot for a lot of guys to even try to come close. So I think it's one of those things, right, where he needs to find a dance partner, bro, and find somebody willing to get in there and mix it up with him. And I think once he does, I'm ready for that.
And he's going to have a hard time getting bigger names in there with him, right? Because unfortunately, Teofimo and Haney's in court. Teofimo is kind of in his own world, so it's tough to know what direction he's going to take. But, can he get, an Isaac Cruz to get in the ring with him? Can he get Michelle Rivera to get in the ring with him? Josh Taylor? Can he get somebody in the bottom half of that top 10 or top 15 to help him kind of stand out to some of the guys at the top? like Jack Catterall, like Richardson Hitchins, who we're going to get to shortly. Is there any way he can get himself to stand out in the rest of the division?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I think he's in the same boat as an Isak was, as Liam Paro was, Hitchins' opponent, right? Paro was kind of in that, and then finally somebody gave him a shot, and then it was off and running. We all know Isak, pretty much he was off and running after Tank gave him a shot, even in a losing effort, because it was a short notice fight. Now, Pitbull's, a big name, right? I think that's where Delgado is. He's Pitbull prior to Tank. He's just waiting for somebody like that. Like you just said, he's waiting for that one, and it only takes one, bro. You just need one. You need somebody to get in there. Oh, come on. We'll get to that in a second. But, you just need that one guy, and then once he gets that one guy, I think he's going to make it interesting enough, win, lose, or draw, to be able to get on that level and get in there and mix it up.
Another fun one would be Japan's Andy Hirayoko, who got a great win over Ismael Barroso a couple months ago. That's another fun matchup. Great division. Let's get into some of the other guys in this division. Richardson Hitchins getting a pretty dominant win by decision over Liam Paro. One of those judges having it 9-3 for Paro. That judge should really never work a meaningful fight again. That's a really rough scorecard to turn in. But nonetheless, the right guy gets the call. To me, what was so impressive about Hitchins was it didn't happen overnight, right? It was a slow boil. It took him 5 rounds to kind of figure out Paro's herky-jerky rhythm and his hand speed. And there were some things Paro was bringing to the table that were making Hitchins uncomfortable. And the corner gave him the right sense of urgency. And by the 7th round, he just completely separated himself from Paro. And Paro just looked lost, man. He really just looked lost. And that's a talented, resilient, multi-dimensional champion. And Hitchins is making it look like easy work. This is a game-changing win right here. That's how you crash the division.
So here's if I can be the devil's advocate here, right? Hitchins, I think that the 9-3 card, to me, the only reason it was excusable is because Hitchins wasn't doing enough of the impressive stuff.
But I mean, 9-3 for Paro is wild, bro.
Yeah, let's be real clear. That's trash. You know what I'm saying? That's a trash. That's a trash scorecard. But I think it's all about perception too, right? Paro's busier. He's the guy coming forward the whole time. I've not to excuse judges, but I've made this observation before, is that where you sit as far as where the ring is associated with can greatly affect how you score the fight. Remember, we're watching this from bird's eye view. We're watching this from the television angles, which means we're getting all the good stuff, right? These guys are ringside, eye level, on a side of the ring. And if depending on where you're sitting, it could look like Paro is winning the fight, especially when, again, and I do think that Hitchins won this fight. I do think it was easy, but I think he could have done more. If he was just more active, right, he would have blown this fight out. There wouldn't have been any question about it, because whenever he threw punches, Paro had nothing for him.
Well, to be fair, I don't think there's really any question about it. I don't really, other than that judge, I don't see anyone even saying that this was a close fight, because it wasn't.
I don't think it is. But the problem is, if you're somebody who likes activity and you like to see a guy act like he's better than, like, let's face it, Hitchins was much better than Paro, but he let Paro hang around a little bit because he wasn't active enough. What happens when you're not active enough? You can be the far better fighter, right? If the other guy's just more active, he can make it look like a much more interesting fight than it actually is. And that's all I'm saying there. And okay, I did my best to make it seem interesting. At the end of the night, Hitchins, blew this fight out. He deserved the win. But I will just say that I understand it be from that viewpoint. I don't agree, but I just to make the argument.
Yeah, there were elements of this performance that kind of reminded me of when Devin Haney beat Regis Prograis, and I thought, it was such a beautiful display of boxing against a high level guy. Now the question is, how does Hitchins, catapult this into other meaningful fights, particularly when the division, like we've said at the top, is Haney and Tiafimo, and they're sort of inactive fighters at the moment. Um, but I do hope that Hitchins is able to turn this win into something more significant and not just be one of those champions that's kind of waiting around for a big fight. I hope he gets a Jack Catterall fight, an Arnold Barbosa fight. I hope that he takes meaningful challenges and doesn't just kind of wait for these other two guys to say his name.
I unfortunately feel like if he's looking to unify, that's going to be a while, bro.
Yep.
It's we're talking several years probably before he gets another strap around his waist at 140. I think if he's really trying to make moves against other champions, he's probably going to have to go up to 147. I hate to have to say that, but you look at the landscape. I mean, Tiafimo's interview during the actual boxing card on ESPN was weird, and it kind of makes you believe, yeah, he's really not going to be.
It's just tough to know what he's doing. It's just tough to know what he's doing.
And he's switching trainers, right? He's getting Reynoso in there. So he's probably going to take him a couple of fights to figure that relationship out. You know what I'm saying? Hitchins, right? I think Hitchins Raya would be gold. That might be the easiest fight to make of the other champions right there. Jesus M. You know what? Salute to Jesus M for coming through. But, let's get him matching up some fights. But I think if you're looking at the bigger guys, right, like you just said, the Tios, the Haneys, even the Ryan Garcias, if he sticks around, you know what I'm saying? The bigger names, bigger paydays, it's going to be a while, bro. But I think he is going to have to fight those, that second tier. I wouldn't even necessarily say second tier talent wise, but just second tier paydays. He's going to have to fight those guys for a while before those big money names start to pile
right.
up.
I think he is going to have to build a resume, even though this win over Paro, Paro had some incredible momentum going into this fight, beating Montana Love, beating Subriel Matias, who's sort of the division's boogeyman of the moment. This was a guy with a lot of good momentum behind him. And Hitchins ultimately made it look easy. The thing that really impresses me about him is once he figures out his range, he's a very tough guy to get your hands on because he's got a really sharp jab. That right hand is fast, and I think it's just hard enough to get your attention. And he's just able to master your range. And anytime you break that, he clinches or he smothers. It's not always the prettiest, but it's incredibly effective. And I think that he is going to be a really tough guy to beat.
Him and Matias, you know what I mean?
Why not? And also, I think on a style level, I think you're going to have to be a little more reckless to get in his chest the way that Lemos was in that last fight. I think if you give him, like I said in my article, go check out all the writing we did this weekend. But, I just think if you give him air, he's a problem, bro.
I do love Jesus M's suggestion in Rio. I think he blows Rio out. If I'm being honest with you, just talent level, I think he's even better than
he might
Rio.
be the best guy at 140. He really
but
might.
I would love to see him against a Matias because Matias isn't going to pull a Paro. Matias is going to be in his chest the entire.
The question
fight.
is though, is does he have that Mayweather effect? Does he have that thing where if he's got your timing and your range, he just and between the feinting and the defense and he's making you miss and what are we doing? We're waiting around and then he's hitting you. Is he able to make guys, kind of lose their way the way that Floyd could do?
We're gonna fuck around and find out, aren't we?
We're gonna fuck around and find out. And a bright future for that guy. Henry LeBron getting a fun win over tough veteran Christopher Patufo Diaz. This was a really fun fight. Clash of styles. Nibs, what were your thoughts on this one?
LeBron has grown on me, man. Like I remember the first time I watched him get a dub. I think it was ESPN Plus. It was like an undercard, and I was like, what is it with this guy that people are so in love with? Like I thought he was an average fighter. You know what I'm saying? Every time I've seen him though, he's pulling me in. You know what I mean? This last fight, I can't say I'm a full blown fan, but I'll be goddamn if he isn't entertaining as shit to watch, bro. So you know what? He's another one of those guys. Throw him in the bucket of whenever he's on, my TV's on. You know what I'm saying?
And it's funny because
I'm with it.
he's got that kind of lateral movement, defense first style, but he's also not afraid. Like he'll lay on the ropes and kind of just have an exchange with you real quick. And I think that Diaz forced him to do that. He was cutting the ring off. He's a solid veteran, bro. That's a solid veteran fighter right there. He made the ring real small. He was hitting him in the body. He closed strong down the back half, but LeBron, he's got that thing, man. He's a really solid boxer who can get down when he needs to.
You know what it is? He's a guy, right? Like he's a guy like Mickey Ward was a guy, Arturo Gatti was a guy. Is he ever going to be a world beater? Is he ever going to be, one of these pound for pound guys? I don't know. I doubt it. But is he a guy that every time you turn on the damn TV, you don't want to watch him fight? Yeah. And that's all you need. You know what I'm saying? Like when I see his name now, I'm like, hey, let me tune in there because whatever's going to happen, it's going to be fun. He's going to be active. He's going to do his thing. And again, he's gaining on me, bro. I think that talent wise, I think he's got enough to maybe get a belt, somewhere if somebody gives him a shot. Does he hold on to it? I don't know. But again, he's one of those guys. Okay, let me watch him. You know what I mean? I definitely watch him before, I watch what's his name? What's the dude fought Haney? Casares, whatever the fuck his name. Catterall, no, not Catterall. The Australian guy, what's his name?
Cambosis, George Cambosis.
Cambosis. Yeah, I'd watch him over Cambosis any day of the week. So give me this guy. I like it, man. He's gaining on me.
You know who else is growing on me, bro? Is Yankiel Rivera. I mean, 112 doesn't have a whole lot of talent right now. You got Yafai, you got Kenshiro, but this is a guy, to me at least, who's really starting to stand out and separate himself. He's in his 7th fight. He's got a couple of kind of regional or off belts, but Yankiel Rivera, I think, is really fast tracking himself right now.
What's impressive about that is, for anybody that knows anything about the smaller weight classes, those are pretty much owned by the Japanese, right? Like if you're a Japanese fighter, you've probably got a belt in any of those weight classes up to 115, or 118. Really, they're owned by the guys overseas. To have someone who isn't come in and say, "Hold on, wait a minute, I got y'all," because that's another thing too. Those Japanese fighters are technical as shit. Whether they have power or not, most of those guys are super fucking technical. So they're hard to beat. You know what I mean? Especially at that weight. So the fact that he's making moves the way he's making moves makes it that much more impressive to me.
And Rivera, very technical in his own right, though he has flaws for sure. He does have a pretty cerebral approach to his work.
And that's what makes him interesting. I think the guys that are flawed, right? Obviously, but have talent. Those are the guys that make some of the best fighters, bro. And they make you want to watch because it's like, hey, you kind of know what's going to happen, but some other shit can happen too. So you tune in.
Nibs, random kind of story review recap of a fight that happened this weekend that I think is worth noting. Kubrat Pulev getting a unanimous decision over Mahmoud Char, who was once known as Manuel Char. On paper, I don't really give a shit about this fight, and I happened to just turn it on while I was working on the computer, and I noticed out of the side of my hearing that they are calling Char the WBA champion. So I'm thinking, no, the fuck he isn't. Usyk has all the belts, and if there's the IBF, obviously Dubois has at this point, but there's no way this guy's the WBA champ. And I look it up, and then I send you that picture where it says Usyk is the super champion and Char is the regular champion. Now, I'm a pretty
And they
diehard.
have an interim champion also, by the
Right.
way.
We're pretty diehard guys, right?
Right.
I don't remember ever seeing Char other than when he fought Vitaly Klitschko way back in the day. I'm talking 2011, 2012 is the only time I've seen this guy fight. So I started doing a little deep dive on how exactly is that the case. And I'm not going to give you every single detail. This information is out there, but it goes all the way back to 2014 when Ruslan Shagayev won a decision over Fresa Kendo. We're going deep cuts here. When he wins a decision over Fresa Kendo, Akendo is entitled to a rematch, but Shagayev retires. At some point, there's a fight that's going to happen between Akendo and Shannon Briggs. Shannon Briggs fails a drug test. Then the fight is going to be between Akendo and, at the time, Manuel Char. That fight don't happen because Char fails a drug test. Then somehow, some way, Trevor Bryan's got that WBA regular title, and he's going to fight Char. But then Don King doesn't let that fight happen. And then Trevor Bryan winds up losing to Daniel Dubois, but Dubois doesn't have that title. So somewhere in the mix, Char gets reinstated as the WBA regular champion, was actually supposed to fight Jarrell Miller. That fight doesn't happen. This fight with Pulev was scheduled for March, and then Char had an injury that pushed the fight back. So this is a guy who's had lawsuits and belt politics and injuries and drug tests and name changes. To me, a very, what I would say, mysterious figure in the sport of boxing is Mahmoud Char. Pulev winds up getting the decision, but as I'm watching it, I'm thinking, how confusing would that be for somebody who doesn't know what boxing to hear that this guy is the WBA world champion, but we got two guys in their 40s that are far beyond their best days, fighting for this belt. I just thought it was worth covering because it's a saga that's been going on for nearly a decade that looks like it's actually over now that Pulev has beaten Char.
And you have Fresa Kendo to thank. His lawsuit that kept that business going on even after he retired. His lawsuit kept this going on for the longest time, right? So even after he retired and was no longer eligible to win this, it still kept that belt because the lawsuit, he won it, was, it kept this open. So we have Fresa Kendo to thank, and Kubrat Pulev should send him a very nice Christmas card for him being able to get a belt for Christmas. I'll say this, bro. I think anybody who's been a fan of the sport of boxing long enough understands that we're in an era now where the belts are just getting fucking ridiculous. I mentioned to you when you sent me that, I said, yeah, and don't forget, David Benavidez is the WBC's interim champion at 168 and 175. When you get to the lower weight classes, it's almost unbearable. I think each of the major four, IBF, WBA, WBO, WBC, and some of these weight classes, there are 12 champions plus. You know what I mean?
I think I read that the WBA, there's 17 weight divisions, but they have 42 titleists at the moment.
Yeah.
So that means that they have more than two at every weight.
Think about that.
Yeah.
Think about that. There can be one belt in a weight class that has three champions in it. What the fuck? And to me, I know we're talking about Char and Pulev, but not so much for me. It's the belts.
Yep.
It waters down being a champion. I remember back in the day, if you won a belt, it meant something, right? Now it's kind of like, are you really the champ though? Like you said, we didn't even know this was a championship fight. I didn't until I turned it on and I was like, huh?
Well, why would it be, right? Why would it be? Char has been largely inactive. Pulev lost a close decision to Derek Chisora, is a good older fighter, right? For a 43-year-old guy, he's still basically competent. But why would he be fighting for a world title? It doesn't make any sense.
Money, sanctioning fees.
And that's a great point. That's a great point.
Fees.
Yeah, but ultimately it does nothing but damage to the sport, right? Because it allows for all of this bullshit that's been going on for the last 10 years with this belt, and somehow there's the delusion that, oh, if you have that belt, you're in some way be entitled to fight Usyk. Who wants to see Manuel Char against Usyk, bro? Nobody's trying to see that fight. All it's done is give legitimacy to people like Don King. It's given opportunities to fighters with failed drug tests that really don't deserve to be fighting for titles. And it's created sort of a sideshow. It's the biggest sideshow in championship boxing, honestly. Has been this saga.
It's to me, and I've said this for a long time. I don't necessarily need there to be one belt, right? I'm cool with there being the sanctioning bodies, but I think the sanctioning bodies should have one belt. I think there should be some kind of governing body that can come in and say, hey, look, you have one belt a weight class. Cut this other shit out, because
even if you're saying
it's
one
predatory,
world title, even if you're saying one world title, because the regional belts I think help guys and it establishes. I see the value of the regional titles, but you're
world
right.
title.
Yeah,
if you're the WBC champion at light heavyweight, you shouldn't have to share that. There shouldn't be an asterisk. Like if people who just want to get an idea of what this looks like, just go to ESPN, look at the champions, see how many asterisks there are. There shouldn't be any asterisks, bro. There should be one champ, you know what I mean, per belt. I think that's for before Golden Boy bought the ring, right? Before they bought that out, a lot of people looked at the ring champion as the champion, right? Because there's no ring interim, there's no ring and recess, there's no diamond ring champion. There's one guy.
There's the Ring Magazine champion. Yeah.
Who's the Ring Magazine champion. A lot of people were like, that's the guy. You know what I'm saying? For the longest time. And I think when Golden Boy bought him out, it kind of watered it down a little bit. But I think a lot of people would, and I'm not saying we should go towards the UFC or anything like that, but it would clear up a lot of things if there was just one belt, right? That meant everything, and that belt didn't break itself down, right? And I think these sanctioning bodies are just super predatory. They've created all these interims and diamonds and this, that, and the third, because then they get to attach a sanctioning fee to it, and it's really sad, bro. It just needs to be cleaned up, in my opinion. And I don't know anybody who's really going to look at Pulev as a legitimate champion. And the crazy thing is, he did earn it. He beat the guy who's got a belt. So, I mean, okay.
Well, and the thing is, he won't even be marketed as, this was on a smaller promoter. All of these WBA regular fights have been under the supervision of Don King, who is not a relevant global promoter anymore. This has been a legitimate sideshow for 10 years now.
Bro, I wouldn't be surprised if Adrian Broner comes back and gets a WBA belt at this point.
At heavyweight.
Yeah. Like it'll
be Adrian Broner versus Fresa Kendo for the WBA.
For the WBA interim golden,
the WBA Big Boy Championship, baby.
There it is. the About Billions WBA title. There it is.
Exactly, dude. Exactly. Nibs, hell of a show as always, my friend. Talk to the people about supporting local boxing. Yes, sir.
Look, we say it all the time, and you look at these guys that are fighting, right? You look at an Oscar Valdez. I think Oscar Valdez is one of the best fighters in the boxing business, right? He's from Arizona. He's from here. He came up the hard way. He didn't have a big promoter to start with. He was fighting out of local gyms. A lot of his early fights were in Mexico. A lot of his early fights were in places you wouldn't go with the camera, for people to be able to watch on television. And you see why people keep showing up for him, no matter win, lose, or draw, right? Because they're supporting their guy, right? He's their guy. There are people traveling all over the world to come support him because he's there, the guy, and you see his love and respect for the people that show up for him. He stops for all the photos, he signs all the things, right? That is just a portion of the reason why you need to support local boxing. Oscar Valdez wouldn't be Oscar Valdez without all the support he got in those dive places and all those, dusty bars, back row places that, barely got a sanctioned fight, to happen in. But they happened because people showed up, enough people showed up. You have to support the local boxing because these guys will eventually get to the bigger platforms and on their name dropped on shows like ours because we're going to be talking about them. If nobody shows up to support them, nobody shows up and shows out consistently, we'll never hear about them. Support your local boxing. You're supporting yourself. You're supporting your community. That's Dakota. I'm Nibs. Fuck with us.
That was beautiful. Head on over to the ITRBoxing merch store to support us and help us continue doing what we love to do, which is talking boxing every week, giving you the real. Shout out to Jesus M, and we're out.